Hey, what's going on, beautiful souls on Facebook? This is Peter Clark Nelson, and I want to welcome you to another special Facebook Live based on the Abundance Activation Virtual Mentorship Program. So for many of you who joined me the other day, I was with the co-founder of the Abundance Activation Program, Matthew Patty, and we were joined by one of two guest mentors, the divinely gifted Cedar Rose, and we were talking about the upcoming second Facebook Live series or class that we're going to be having, and it is with the other guest mentor of the Abundance Activation, the incredibly divinely gifted Thea Sullivan, who is the founder of Big Picture Guidance. Thea, it is an honor and a joy to be joined by you today.
Thank you, Peter. I'm really excited we're doing this.
Thank you. Matthew and I are very honored and excited to have you be a part of the Abundance Activation, and the topic that you're covering is something that you are incredibly well known for. For many people who are not aware of your sacred work, you have been an intuitive guide and a channel for over 25 years, developing workshops, online courses, doing one-to-one work, facilitation at various gatherings and retreats. And I've had the great honor and privilege to be collaborating with you. And we were also together at the Alive in the Mystery retreat and gathering in Mount Shasta back in September. So to be able to work with you in this capacity and to have your knowledge and wisdom and your presence as a part of the Abundance Activation Program, it's not only, as I said, a joy and an honor, but it's also an integral piece to the journey that individuals will be taking when they join us on this 6-week, 8 live classes during 6 weeks, in which Matthew, myself, you, and Sita are going to take heart-centered, conscious-minded entrepreneurs, or quite frankly, anybody who has a sacred movement or an inspired message that you want to get seen, heard, and felt by those that it is designed for. And while that certainly is a primary focus, if you have a passion of raising the consciousness of the planet, however, we all can relate to being passionate about a particular subject or a movement and wanting to get that message seen, heard, and felt by those that we've created it for. However, there's a lot of things that get in the way, and it's usually unconscious programs, it's fears, wounds, and it's also asking for guidance, but then not listening to it. And what gets in the way of our intuition. And so that is really the focus of your class, Thea. And for those of you who are joining us live or who are watching this on a replay, we're going to dive into some of the subjects that Thea is going to be taking each of the participants through during her class. And it is called Listen and Let Go, a next level introduction to the power of intuition. So as we get into what this next level introduction looks like, such as topics as energy hygiene, what does that look? What exactly is having good energy hygiene? Why is discernment a crucial piece to developing and listening to your intuition? But before we get into those subjects, let's talk a little bit about your journey, because you are also known as a channel for the guides. And you are also a professional writer and somebody who is, from my experience, the most prolific writer I've ever had an opportunity to collaborate with. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to your journey. So let's take a little bit of a journey back to when the guides came through and when you began really becoming consciously aware of the power of intuition in your life.
Thanks, Peter. First, I just want to say what an honor it is to be part of the Abundance Activation Program. And yeah, I'm really excited to collaborate with you guys. So I became an intuitive really by accident. As Peter knows, when I was in my mid-20s, all I wanted to do was to become a successful writer, a successful literary writer. And I sort of organized my life to have time to write. I was also an English teacher. And because I was so driven with ambition, which is not a bad thing, but it was really coming from my mind, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, and I had a lot of ideas about how I wanted it to look. And I was really trying to control my creative process to make it turn out the way that I imagined it needed to be. And as any writer knows, or really any of us who put that much pressure on ourselves and really driven ourselves forward using our minds and with a lot of control, I was pretty miserable and it wasn't working out very well. So one day, and at the same time, I had begun to discover spiritual teachings. And so these two things were sort of happening at the same time in my life. And one day I just couldn't take the suffering that I was putting myself through anymore. And I was so frustrated and miserable that I finally just surrendered and I literally prayed for help. I literally was sitting at my writing desk, miserable, tearful, just tearing my hair out. And I closed my eyes. I literally opened my hands and I just prayed, please help me. And I had no idea what it was, but I heard some words in my head. And people always ask, so I'm clairaudient, so I hear guidance, but it's not actually audible. It's just like words, almost like thoughts. I can sort of sense them more than I hear them, but I say hear because it's easier. Anyway, I just heard something in my head and I wrote it down, and that kept happening. I kept hearing some more phrases and writing them down. And honestly, it was just because it was easy writing that I kept doing it. Like, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it wasn't me. I didn't know I wasn't making it up. However, over time, I kept going with this practice because it was the only kind of writing that was working for me. And when I stepped away from it and went back, I read it and I realized it was messages for me. And it wasn't me speaking. And it was much wiser, more eloquent, and extremely helpful. And actually it was the help I asked for. But as Peter and I have talked about, when we get guidance, it's not always the help we want, but it's always the help we need when it's, really higher guidance. And so the message, one of the first things that I got was listen and let go. And I didn't know what that meant, but I guess I would say I've spent the 25 years since then learning what that means. So that's what I have to share. I have, hundreds of pages of guidance that I have received over those years. I've shared those teachings in the form of writing classes, helping writers free their creativity with the principles that have come through from the guides. And now I specialize in working with people on developing their own intuition. Because the most important thing for me is not that people sort of listen to what I say. It's that they hear what their own inner guidance is, and really get confident in their ability to hear or sense or see whatever the modality is that feels natural, because each of us are different in how we pick up our intuition. So that's really my passion, and that's actually the guides' focus as well. When I do readings for people, is they want to help teach my clients how to hear their own guidance. So it's really not about the guides wanting to be up here. It's really about all of us tuning in inwardly and listening and letting go. So that's my story.
It's a very inspiring story, and one that I know there's a lot of details and specifics to your journey, which is being woven into a series of different programs as you continue to bring this out further to more people. And it's also a journey that, while obviously each of us have a unique and distinct set of experiences, it's sort of like the window dressing of our life story. And sometimes people can relate and sometimes they can't to the specifics, but the through line, the commonality, the underlying challenge of moving through and clearing out ancestral wounds, cultural programming. And what in the world does this have to do with intuition? Well, actually everything, because we have all been born into a world that in some cases knowingly and unknowingly educated us to not listen to and trust our intuition, but in turn to look outside of ourselves for other people telling us what is right, what is wrong, and to fit within a confined and very stifling box. And so I say this because one of the questions I wanted to talk with you about in the subjects is the controversial nature of intuition. And it was something you and I have had a couple conversations on, and it really prompted me to think about it, because the first time I heard the word controversy associated with intuition was in one of our initial conversations. The more I thought about it, I'm like, of course. Because the more we tap into our intuition, the more we become in tune with our divine nature, And there's a lot of benefits that come from that that threaten the status quo. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because as heart-centered, conscious-minded entrepreneurs, which clearly the work you do is related to everyone, but with the Abundance Activation Program, the way we've really designed this, it's for individuals who have a sacred movement, or they have a spiritually driven business. Maybe they're launching a new book, a program, a new business. And as they're doing that, no matter how successful they've been or how long they've been on the path of consciousness, fears will come in, doubt will show up, they will hear guidance from their ego, they'll hear opinions and suggestions from literally everybody in their life.
Yes.
And then there's a single voice that is unmistakable amongst all the others. And that's the one that we should be listening to. And oftentimes it's not the one we tend to go to right away. So let's talk about why intuition is controversial, and what are some of the benefits that people can find by tuning into that power of intuition?
Those are great questions. I think one of the reasons intuition is controversial is that, in a way, it calls us to something much greater than who we think we really are. And it also shows us that we can be much more free than we think is possible. And because, in some ways, so much of the way we've lived for a long time is fear-based, right? But intuition is the opposite of fear-based. When we're really in touch with our own inner guidance, we're continually pulled away from fear. We're pulled into faith, into taking leaps, into being more of who we thought we were, into being more self-sufficient, or more taking leaps of faith that it can be threatening, I think, to other people, to potentially like what we're taught, the idea that we need institutional sort of approval to live a certain way, or to in terms of entrepreneurs, I think there's so much we have to offer, and so many people, so many of my clients are feeling a call to live in a bigger way, to offer services to others, to create really a new world in different ways. And there's this programming, this cultural programming that says, who am I to do this? This is too big, this is too risky, this is too out there. But listening and letting go means that we say yes to these unlikely calls that we feel. And part of why it's taken me so long to be out here more and more publicly as an intuitive is exactly that reason, that what I've been called to is not exactly conventional. It's not exactly something that's easy to explain in some ways, but I have really gotten to the point where I really can say yes, and I can be free, and I can show up and be who I am and share that with others. And it's such a great joy. But sure, it's a little controversial in a way, because we're being called out beyond cultural programming. I think that's why. And actually, that's a huge liberation. But it's a step-by-step process, I think.
Yeah, and that's very well said. And it really is a leap into the unknown. And so for all of us, and I also say this for anybody who's joining us here on the live stream, or you're watching this on a replay, something that you just said, Thea, which is really important to call attention to, and that is, for all of us, no matter how well we've done in our lives and how we've gotten our messages out, or maybe we think we haven't gone far enough, we're at a critical tipping point of society right now, where not only is more of society awakening to their own sense of divinity and tapping into their intuition, but as they're doing it, they're not really sure what power they're tapping into, because they've never been taught how to really be a good steward of that energy. And so I say that because for many of us who have spiritual driven businesses, or we have these sacred movements, and we look at ourselves and know that we are heart-centered leaders, we're being called on to step into a bigger level of playing. We're being asked to play bigger than ever before. And what that looks like, and I just want to be really clear for everybody, is different. So what may be, very big for one person might, to another individual, actually be playing small. And so vice versa. So, I mean, it's not about, don't compare yourself to whether or not, well, this person's doing this, or this person wrote several books. this goes back to, what is it that's calling you to play bigger? It's not your ego. It's not society. It is your intuition. So that initial impulse, that initial feeling, that intuitive hit is just that. It's coming in from your intuition. So the question is, if that's where it's coming from, and let's face it, most of us know this, the key is, how do we navigate the guidance when we're not getting all of the details right up front?
Right.
How do we trust that we're going to go in the right direction when people that we love and trust around us might not see or feel what we're hearing and seeing and feeling? So they're saying, well, you should go left, when the intuition's going, go right. And if we do that, it sends a ripple effect across our environment and our field of energy. So this comes back to a subject that isn't often talked about, I believe, enough, and it's energy hygiene. And this is part of working with and cultivating that power of intuition, and how that plays a role in taking in information from those around you, or at the very least, in the pervasive nature of social media. Where do you go on social media, and how do you discern what information you're consuming? Because as you bring that into your field, you could be muddying up your energy field. So let's talk a bit about what energy hygiene is and the correlation to intuition.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic, because I think of energy hygiene as just keeping our energy field clear enough and spacious enough and receptive enough that we can then perceive what is actually coming through for us. And most people who are listening to this, I'm sure, are, typically empaths, compassionate people who are aware that it's natural, if you have that kind of healing impulse or that empathic impulse, to pull other people's energy into your field and to carry it around, or to feel the suffering of others, or whatever it might be. But what happens when we're not mindful about clearing out our energy is that we can get a little cluttered and confused, and it's hard for us to read our own signals. So I teach a very simple meditation. That's a daily meditation that's all about just taking the step of clearing out the energy field and really feeling what it feels like to be centered, spacious, calm, receptive, open, and just to be in that being state. And that's something I wanted to mention based on what we just talked about, because it's easy to focus on, intuition is here to show us what to do, and that's part of it. But intuition is also about showing us who we really are, like how to be in our own energy, how to emanate our own frequency, not someone else's. So, we know that everything flows from that, right? It all flows from that being state. So that's a big part of, and actually I'm interrupting myself, but I'll say, I think this is why, as a writer, it was a perfect segue for me to become an intuitive, because to be a creative writer or any kind of artist, and this is true for any creative person, you empty yourself out and you wait for inspiration. And obviously it's not just waiting for inspiration, but that's a big part of it, is to just get very quiet, clear, spacious, and open, and to just sort of trust and see what comes. And that's a state that we can only achieve if we're not all cluttered up with all the stuff of the world, other people, all that and even stuff from the past. So sometimes what we'll find is that we're carrying around a lot of stuff from the past, and that's kind of making it hard for us to hear, because we're keep being drawn back into that. And without going into a tangent, it's another piece of intuition that I like to include when I talk about it, which is sometimes we're called to heal. Sometimes we're called to look at the stuff. It's not a problem that it's in the way. It's just another step in the process. So sometimes when we tune in and we try to get our energy nice and clear, we find material that needs looking at. And that's totally okay. That's part of, I like to use the metaphor of the river to talk about intuition. I've heard intuition called the current that knows the way. And our mind likes to think the way is this like glorious path, forward with no obstacles, but really the way is about growth. It's up and down. It can be messy. It can be challenging, but it also is really leading us to our bigger life and a bigger sense of who we are and what we're here to give.
Thank you for saying all that, because there's so much there for us to build on. I want to first and foremost go back to one of the things you said about the guided meditation that you work with your clients on, you work with individuals in your workshops, and I know that's going to be a part of the class for the abundance activation. So I want to just take a moment to just acknowledge and honor that. So again, for those of you who are watching this on the Facebook live stream, or you're watching this on a replay, if you've been watching and following the work that Matthew and I have been putting up about the abundance activation, we are actually, this program launches on October 29th here in North America and October 30th in Australia. And Thea's class is class number 5. And that guided meditation, you will be taken through that in the live class. These are not pre-recorded classes. These are live classes where we come together, not as individuals and subject matter experts who know better. As we talked about, Matthew and I, on multiple Facebook Lives, and particularly the one the other day with Cedar Rose, we are coming together in a community. We are equals. We are peers. And yes, each of us have our own distinct path. We have wisdom and experience that we've gleaned along the journey. But everything we're talking about in terms of what gets in the way and how to transmute it and how to face it, and then how to feel in tune with our intuition, how to feel in tune with our sacred mission and get that message out, we've gone through all these different levels. So nothing that we're talking about, nothing in the guided materials, nothing in the guided meditations, nothing in these live classes is based on theory. Every single thing is rooted in real world application. And so really a lot of what we're doing is we're bringing in higher level guidance. As of course with Thea, you're a renowned channel, but this information isn't just simply coming from the ethers and sort of sitting there in the upper level chakras. We're pulling it down into the lower chakra regions, and we're grounding it here in this planet as human beings. And then we're bringing that information and distilling it in ways that people can assimilate and bring into their own sacred mission. And that's what each of you who are watching this are doing. Whether you have a business or you don't, you yourself, you're an intuitive empath. And this takes me back into something else you were saying, Thea, and why this is so relevant to all of us, regardless of whether we see ourselves as heart-centered entrepreneurs or not. If you feel that you are a creative person, and we're all creative in some way, but if this is your career and your job is to tap into that higher level creative essence and bringing that through for others, you said something that was really important. As creatives, and particularly as empaths, we have a tendency to pull in massive amounts of energy, and then we flow with it, sort of like a professional surfer riding a big wave. Eventually the wave is going to wane, and then it's going to be going back out to the ocean and wait for the next wave. It's in between those spaces that a lot of times we're bringing in energy, and we're also hearing our ego share with us its idea of what works and what doesn't work. And so when we're riding the wave, we're in a flow. We're loving life, we're doing what we love, we're loving what we do. When that energy dips and we have to rejuvenate, that's when some really interesting things start to happen, and it can be very easy for us to get derailed. We can start questioning what we're doing. We can begin doubting who we are. And, like as you were saying earlier, who am I to share this information? Who am I to go to the next level?
Yeah.
So this takes us back into one of the more prevalent areas of focus for the class, and that is discernment, because it's in that sort of ebb and flow, in that limbo state, if you will, and the rejuvenation of the creative juices, that discernment plays a pivotal role in keeping us on that track towards fulfilling our sacred mission and bringing forth whatever creation we're giving birth to. So from your experience, how has discernment played a role in your journey, and how do you see this being applied by those that you've worked with?
Wow. Well, I think discernment in some ways is sort of a higher order skill set of intuition. So, there's so many stages to it, but what discernment really is how to distinguish the difference between different kinds of inner signals. So what is the mind and what is something deeper than the mind? And I will just say, I can't remember now what you were saying that made me think of this, something about the ego, but about the ways don't have. And I'll just give an example. Typically when we get an intuitive hit, we don't get the why. We don't get all the information. And it's almost designed that way because it's about faith and trust. So the typical of wording that you'll hear people say, and they won't even be conscious of it, is I just have a feeling. For some reason, I just have a feeling. Okay, and I will just say this, Peter, I'll just get personal here and say, when I first met Peter and I didn't really know him, I didn't really know you, I knew I needed to work with you in some way. It was very clear. I didn't know why. I hadn't really met you. We hadn't really worked together. Now that's what I call the thunderbolt. When you get the thunderbolt, you don't have to do so much discernment because it's more obvious. But sometimes we get more of the what I call the breadcrumbs, right? Just a little, and we have to follow the breadcrumbs, and it's more subtle. But there is that characteristic of intuition. If we think we know the whole story and how it's going to turn out and all the whys and wherefores, it's usually not intuition. So that's an example of discernment. There are a lot of different sort of markers of intuition, but the idea is we want to get confident enough in our ability to sense the difference between intuitive knowing and our mind's sort of machinations. And the more we do that, the more we're like, oh no, this feels deeper. This feels right. I can trust this. I don't know why, but I feel that I can. And then we act on it. And in my experience, in my students' and clients' experiences, that's when you start getting in the flow. Like you'll look back and say, oh, it was because of this, or sometimes we don't even know why, but it just feels right, or it just flowed, or it led us to a big lesson that even though it wasn't easy, that's the thing, sometimes it's more in the direction of growth, but then we can look back and say, oh, well, see, that got me through this whole set of lessons, and now I'm prepared. I'm on another level. I'm prepared for the next leap. So yeah, the more we can discern and trust and say yes, our intuition actually gets stronger and we can trust it more and more. So I hope that answered your question.
Oh, it answered the question. And that's the beautiful thing about just this engagement here on this Facebook Live. It's both the beautiful thing and also the challenging thing. Like, I just want to go diving further into those subjects because they're so important to the entrepreneurial journey for spiritual entrepreneurs, conscious-minded leaders, and individuals who are working through intuition. And that is part of their business. And let's face it, on some level, as an intuitive empath, and most people watching this it's a constant development. It's developing the trust. It's cultivating the clarity. It's staying centered and grounded when you're being pulled energetically by what might seem an unconscious feeling, and you might think that's your intuition, but it's actually your ego, or in many ways, it's the artificial intelligence of your wound. Your wound has an artificial intelligence about it. It has woven a series of stories into things that make your body and your mind, it makes you think this is real, and it's masquerading as your intuition. So what I love about the subject you're saying and how you've answered that is it's reminding all of us that in those moments where we feel like we're being pulled to and from other people's opinions, our own wounds, our own unconscious programming, fears, what have you, allowing ourselves the space to just sit, to trust, that we don't have to have all the details, but if we really listen to that, as you said, there's that thunderbolt and there's those breadcrumbs, the more we learn to follow and trust that, the easier it is to discern the difference between the energies that are floating through us. Okay. And these are the subjects. This is, again, why the purpose of this Facebook Live. Look, in 30 minutes, there's no way we're going to, look, one of these subjects could take a couple of hours. Energy hygiene is a workshop in of itself, discernment workshop in of itself. And I want to say this to everybody who's listening and watching this and joining us here. These are subjects that we will be getting into. And I say we, really, Thea is driving this class. She is the facilitator of Class 5 of the Abundance Activation Program. And one of the primary reasons that both Matthew and I felt drawn to engage with Thea, I'm having the great honor of obviously collaborating with you outside of the Abundance Activation Program. And so I'm very well aware of the incredible depth of your wisdom and the heart-centeredness by which you approach everything. But this piece, when Matthew and I were looking at this program and merging our respective work together to do this, we knew that intuition was a critical piece to understanding and trusting how to work in the quantum field, which is where Matthew's area of expertise comes in. And then intuition is a critical piece to working with the energetic signature of your brand message and where and how to align that with the heart and soul of your audience. What ways to share your brand story, your personal journey, what ways to create your coaching programs, how to listen to your intuition to scale your business. And that's the area where I'm focusing in on. So not a lot of these programs and these online courses really go outside of a particular niched area of focus, which is fine. But I know from my personal experience, and I'm sure you can relate, and so in most of the people watching this, we can take these programs and you sign up for these courses to learn how to do one area of growing our business, or, we want to get better in this area of our consciousness. But oftentimes we get great information and we walk away and we're still stuck and we wonder why. Mm-hmm. How did this happen? Why am I stuck? And in my experience, and clearly in yours, in the journey in which you've been on and how you share this information, it's very apparent that we're getting stuck because we haven't learned how to create and cultivate an intimate relationship with our intuition, which is essentially our higher self, and its infallible guidance.
Yes. And I just want to add to that, because I think the promise of intuition, this is what I've found after years of working with it, is ease and joy and relaxation into the process. Because I find like even if we're a spiritual entrepreneur or a creative person, we can really create suffering for ourselves so easily by feeling like I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be over here. I need to, do all these things. But actually, and there, obviously legwork has its place. We have to take care of things on the 3D level too. But if we can lean back into the river, this idea that we really are being led, we really are supported, we really are not alone. Our higher self is us and can act through us. And, it's all unfolding the way it needs to, even through the difficulties, even through the growth periods. But really that it's like we can turn inward and trust and enjoy it ultimately. That's been the great gift of intuition for me, is listening and letting go means I don't have to be white knuckling it with my hands on the wheel all the time. I really don't. I get to have fun with it. Even when it's kind of challenging, it's still fun and interesting to be like, where is this going? So there's always this element of surprise and mystery. Peter and I talked about this earlier, like even when I think I know what's going to happen, or I think, I'm an intuitive, I have a hit on this, half the time it takes a left turn somewhere I didn't even expect. And that is work playing in the quantum field. And it's fun, it's exciting, it's surprising, it's not easy, but it's it's continually interesting. And it's really about this great intimacy with my own soul path as it unfolds. And how cool is that? That in itself is worth the price of admission. So I think it's a ticket to enjoying the whole thing more and being more aligned and not fighting ourselves. So
I agree wholeheartedly. And it brings up something I know we're just now hitting, I think, the 30-minute mark, and we're going to go a little bit over because there's a story that you shared with me before we started the recording, and it is just the most fantastic way to encapsulate all of this. And before we jump into that, I just want to mention, because we got on here and we started just flowing with everything. Yeah. And I want to acknowledge, so as we talked about at the beginning, the co-founder of the Abundance Activation Program is my dear friend, Matthew Patty. He is the founder of Universal Academy and also the creator of the Zero Limits course. And he was a guest mentor of the beta launch of the activation that I put out several months ago. And over the course of the subsequent several months, he and I began discussing ways in which we can bring our work together. And so hence the Abundance Activation. And so when you talk about the title of your class, it's listening and letting go. And what you were just saying, that, even as an intuitive, you don't always know how things are going to go. You think it's going to go left and then it goes right. And so that's pretty much how this Facebook Live was going. So we were scheduled to go live through an actual live, on Thursday. And then Matthew mentioned to me, so his plane flight got rearranged. And so he's arriving in Toronto. So he wasn't going to be available. And then there were some fires and severe wind storms that were kicking up in your area. So power was being cut out. So I want to share this to everybody who's listening, because
we're flowing. We're just flowing.
We want to do these Facebook Lives. We do them live, but we had to do this as a pre-recorded, and we're streaming it live, but we weren't even sure this was going to happen as of this afternoon. Mm-hmm. So Thea and I were exchanging text messages yesterday and spoke very briefly about whether or not this was even feasible, because multiple power outages out in your area. Then in my region here in California, we were getting hit with power outages. So we were just like, okay, first of all, so Matthew's not on here. That's all right. So we're going to flow with that. Then, well, do we do this live on Thursday? I don't think we can pull it off. Can we try it on Friday? Didn't think we could do that. Yeah. And this is part of the fun. It's to let go, to just trust the guidance and the flow. And if it is to be, it will be, and usually much better than what we ever imagined it to be.
Absolutely. And I just want to piggyback on that and say, we are in a time of rapid change in our world. And all we have to do is look around. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of surprising things happening. But we don't necessarily have to we don't have to go into fear. If we're in touch with our intuition, we really can be agile and flexible and, ready to shift. And that's, as Peter knows, some guidance that has come through for me in recent months about this being a time of change and a time when we all are called upon to be more flexible and agile. And I think inner listening is a critical part of that. And it can help us feel more safe too. If there are things that happen in the outside world that maybe make us nervous, we can just trust and go turn inward and just know that we have a source of guidance that will work for us, that will show up for us. And so that's comforting too. And actually, that's a pretty good segue to the story.
You're picking up on it too. The words comforting, safety, feeling. So I just said a minute ago about this story. So share with everybody how you got lost on the spiritual path.
Okay. So I was telling Peter earlier, so when I was in my mid-20s, and actually this happened about a month after I first heard the guides, and I went to a hot springs resort with my good friend, and we set up our campsite and our comfy tent, and in the afternoon we decided to go for a hike. So we were hiking on the grounds of this hot springs resort, and there were little meditation huts and trails and viewpoints, and we were having a grand old time just hiking. And we actually thought we knew where we were going. But as the afternoon went into evening and the sun started to set, we realized, we better find our way back. And we realized we didn't know exactly where we were. So we tried to loop around and find our way back, and it got darker and darker, and we really started to get nervous. Like, we wanted to get back and have dinner and go to sleep. And because I was just beginning to be an intuitive, or know myself as an intuitive and hear guidance, I said to her, okay, wait, let's just stop for a minute. We stopped in the middle of the trees, and I said, let me just tune in and see if I get anything, about which way to go. And I tuned in. And what I heard was, basically, you're not going to find your way back tonight. In other words, you're staying out here tonight. And I was gobsmacked. I did not think that was the way it was supposed to work. And, I heard that, and we sort of went, oh no. And of course, we didn't really listen to that. We just kept looking for the way back to civilization. But we didn't find it, and it got too dark to see. And so we realized that was actually accurate, and we found a tree and we huddled under it, and we basically stayed there all night long until dawn. And I told Peter what it required of me. Luckily, this was my very good friend, and we could kind of cuddle together for warmth. But what it really required was to dig deep in myself and to find comfort. I actually did a little visualization of like imagining myself being held in some giant hands, like the hands of God, and I just tried to say, "It's okay, you're safe," and call upon that sense of, safety and that presence. And in the morning, we woke up. I mean, well, we didn't ever really fully go to sleep, but we got up and we eventually found our way back to our campsite and a warm meal. But on the way, we saw this sign on the path. We finally found our way back onto the trail that we were originally on, which was supposed to be a loop trail. We think we wandered onto private property in a ranch. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But we found this sign that had fallen down. That was the trail we were supposed to be on. And what the sign said was the spiritual path. And that was literally the name of the path of the hiking trail that we were on, that we had somehow wandered off of. But of course, we can never really get off the spiritual path, right? Everything is the spiritual path. And that night was an example of that. And it's also an example of how, we don't always get the answer we're looking for. We don't always get, okay, here's exactly how to get right back to your cozy sleeping bag and a warm meal. It was, no, there's a challenge in front of you that you're being asked to undergo that's going to help you in the long run. And it really did. It really gave me inner strength that I didn't have before, and a good story to tell.
It's a fantastic story. I'm glad you shared that before we got on here. This is a beautiful way to just encapsulate and underscore all of the key points that you've been beautifully sharing over the course of this Facebook Live. And so as we get ready to wrap up here, I want to just open this up to having you share just where people can find you to work with you, because obviously those who enroll in the Abundance Activation are going to be able to not only have a class with you, but there's also guided material and things that you're preparing for individuals. But there's also the opportunity to be able to work with you one-to-one. And I know that there may be people who are watching this either live or on a replay that are already getting the intuitive hit to reach out to you. So where would somebody be able to connect with you, and what would be the best way that they can go about exploring a collaboration?
Thank you, Peter. My website is bigpictureguidance.com. And the two main ways I work with clients right now are doing intuitive readings. So that's when someone has, a question, problem, a series of questions, things they're struggling with. They come to me and we have a phone call where they talk about what's going on. I sort of take notes and we form the questions. We also do the energy clearing meditation together. And then I hang up and get a message in writing for the client from the guides. It's usually, good 7 pages long, specifically, tailored for that person, their sort of soul guidance. And then I send it off as a PDF, and then we have a follow-up phone call, because it's called, my work is called Big Picture Guidance, because obviously the guides are coming in on a different level. And so they're talking about soul path, soul growth, and beingness and frequency, and a lot of the stuff kind of requires a little translation, and it can be helpful after digesting the written message to sit on the phone for another 30 minutes, and that's included in my introductory session, and just kind of go over, well, what came through for you? How does that sound? How do you translate that into your everyday life? So I do a little coaching in that format as well. So those are my intuitive sessions. And the other thing I do is ongoing intuition coaching. So what that is if you're someone who really knows you're intuitive, but you do struggle at times with hearing it or knowing what your way of knowing is, I work with you on the phone. We have sort of weekly calls, and just tailored to you. I do coaching to help you tune in and hear your own guidance. So that's really about me just playing a coaching role and then bringing all the guidance and wisdom that I've accrued over the years about this, but really more tuning into each individual person and really paying very close attention to their path and what's showing up, and helping to sort of read the clues, if that makes sense. So that's more of a way to really empower yourself over time. And then the sessions, the intuitive readings, are more about, getting those answers that you need in the moment to get you over the hump with whatever is showing up in your life. So those are the two main ways I work with clients right now. I also have, classes that are about developing intuition. Those are a little bit on hiatus right now as I work to relaunch them. So stay tuned, and there'll be more information about that on my website. And you can sign up for my email newsletter on my website and receive information when that gets launched. So.
Fantastic. Well, having been so incredibly fortunate and honored to have collaborated with you over the last couple of months, as I said at the beginning, I have never had an opportunity to collaborate with somebody as prolific as you are in terms of bringing material through. And this material is incredibly powerful. It activates even just reading portions of what comes through from the guides, some of which will be made available in the material for the Abundance Activation. And I say all of this because for those of you either joining us live or watching this on a replay, if you are looking to get clarity on the next steps of your journey, both personally or professionally, there are very few people on this planet that are as precise and as heart-centered and tapped in to the energies as Thea is. And so I would really strongly recommend and invite anybody to take a few moments to tap into your own intuition and fill into that guidance to not only collaborate with Thea, but also to ask yourself, how important is it to be seen, heard, and felt, and to be surrounded by like-minded, soul-aligned individuals who are going to not only celebrate what you're here to bring to the world, but also serve as a beautiful, divinely timed reflection for you to know that this is the time to unleash your inspired voice. This is the time to get that book out there, to get that course and program or new business, or maybe you're launching a podcast, whatever it is you're feeling called to do. This is the opportunity, because there are more people coming into a world and level of awareness that they require some guidance. We all need it, right? So there's no way that we can do this on our own, nor should we even try, even though we've all tried.
Yes.
And so that's really what the Abundance Activation Program is about. It's about getting your sacred work seen, heard, and felt. As Cedar Rose talked about during the Facebook Live, her class is on the courage of creativity. Thea's class is how to listen and let go and take a next level journey into the power of intuition. Matthew and I are taking you through 6 of the other live classes, how to work within the quantum field, how to tap into the power of your imagination, and then how to take your inspired message, the energetic signature of your creation, and to align that with the heart and soul of your audience. So for more information about the Abundance Activation, you can go to the link that's in this post. There's a landing page that details all of the classes, and also you'll be able to get information about Thea in this post as well. You'll find the links to her website at Big Picture Guidance. And with that said, I want to thank everybody for joining us on this journey. And most importantly, I want to thank you, Thea, for saying yes to being a part of this special Facebook Live, especially for navigating all of the, well, I wouldn't call them challenges, but they're reminders of how to use and operate with our intuition. Because like I said, we weren't sure this was even going to be able to take place this week, but it did. And thank you so much. And for everybody who joined us, from our inspired voices and grateful hearts to yours, have a wonderful and creatively abundant day. And we look forward to having you join us on the Abundance Activation.
Thank you, Peter.